really nice group here together tonight, and a really great conversation to talk about. And we were saying earlier how we've discovered so much along this journey in our Feline Health Week. And this is day 4, where we're now going to talk about connecting cats and shelters. And really exciting that there's such a terrific Catalyst Council program that, Jane, you're going to tell us about. In April, you're going to help us talk about how that's connected the care. So a lot, I think we all can learn from that. Everybody can weigh in a little bit with their own comments and questions too. But so I would really like, let's just like dig right in. You know, April, I'd love to have you start us off with our traditional Bridge Club toast.
Great, I would love to. So here's, everyone have their wine, their drink.
Yes.
Okay, Ralph, that's I'm disappointed in you. Here, I say that because Ralph and I have wine together a lot. Here's to making decisions not out of fear of what might happen, but rather out of belief in what could happen. Cheers.
Like that.
Cheers. That. Yes, cheers.
Well said.
Mm-hmm. That is fantastic. So I know we have a lot of great content to bring forward tonight. And I want to make sure we have plenty of time. So I think just like, since with Brenda's usual chit chat to kick things off and get right into talking about what you guys have done together, how it's worked out, and how other people might be able to implement it. So take it away.
I'll start and then switch it over to Jane. I think the biggest point about this conversation is, why did we do it? What prompted us to go through all the time and effort and resources to make this happen? And it really is, there's 3 stakeholders in this process as far as I look at it. There are the cats. And of course, to us, that's probably the biggest deal for most of us, is that these cats are living longer, healthier lives. There are the animal welfare organizations, or the shelters, who we are seeing so many cats go through our system, and cats are still our challenge. They're the challenge to get enough people to adopt them so every cat can have the outcome that that cat deserves. And we know that if cats go to veterinarians, they stay in their homes longer and they don't come to the shelter as often. So it's very self-serving for the shelters to want to connect these cats to this care. And then there's the veterinary community. And of course, the veterinary community has, I think, 2 major reasons to be invested in this. One is their veterinary oath to care for animals, and how much they deeply care about cats, and how hard it is to get people to bring their cats to the veterinarian, or I'm not saying they. And the other one is it's a great business model. How do you acquire new cat patients? And we'll go into some of the details and the statistics on this, but this is a fabulous low-cost way that benefits the shelter, benefits the cat, and benefits the business model of the veterinary practice. It's a win-win-win, and it's just been really such a fabulous journey. I have to call out, Ralph has been a big part of this journey, so I know he'll probably add a lot. Hopefully we'll add a lot to this conversation. When this journey started, he was still the CEO of the Colorado Veterinary Medical Association, and this has been a very active collaboration between the CVMA and the Animal Welfare Organization. So thank you, Ralph. And Jane, Catalyst Council has been absolutely instrumental in this process, so I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about that a little bit.
Well, thank you, April, and thanks for hosting Ralph and I this afternoon at Dumb Friends League. And just a little bit of background too, because I'm a cat veterinarian. You're a veterinarian who owned a practice. I own a practice still. And you owned a practice and now have become the CEO of one of the most progressive, thought-provoking leadership organizations, a shelter in Colorado and across the U.S. and the world now, with the Dumb Friends League. So thanks to your predecessor, who was Ralph's colleague, Bob Rohde, because it really, this program, Connect for Care, which is a Colorado Veterinary Medical Association program, stemmed from the collaboration of those 2 gentlemen. And Ralph, please jump in, but the idea was to, hey, let's have at the point of adoption, and we know that adoption is the most desirable channel for new pet acquisition now with millennials, but Ralph and Bob got together and said, why don't we have the adopters choose a veterinarian at the time that they're going to go to at the time of adoption. And that way that relationship is already started before they even leave the shelter. And so they piloted this in Douglas County, Colorado, south of Denver, with 10 veterinary practices and one shelter, which happens to be one of Dumb Friends League's shelters, the Buddy Center. And over a period of about 18 months to 2 years, as Ralph's nodding his head, the measurements of how many pets were adopted from Buddy Center to how many actually went to the veterinarian and then subsequently returned were enormous. And this originally started as not just a free exam, which was already in your community to begin with, the Healthy New Pet program, but now the veterinarians were opting in to give up to $250 of incremental free veterinary care within 2 weeks of adoption for certain designated illnesses that might be related with coming home from a shelter or adoption-related illness. It's not that they caught anything at the shelter, but just, cats have upper respiratory. Dogs have kennel cough. So what we learned from that pilot, what was learned from that pilot in Douglas County was that of 2,200 adoptions, 85% of those adopters selected a veterinarian at the point of adoption. So that's about 1,900. And 55% of those 2,200 adoptions went to the veterinarian, so more than half after adoption. And what was found is that only 11% of all of those animals needed post-adoption care. So even though the veterinarians had agreed to give up to $250 of care, very few, only about 10% of all of the cats and dogs, this is cat and dog, needed any care. And furthermore, when they spread out the cost of that care through that period of time, through all the adoptions, here's the winning piece. The average cost of new patient acquisition as a result of this program was $12.90.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's
You're kidding me.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So, and here's an even more fun thing. So cumulatively, $13,533 was given away by all those veterinarians across all of those adopted animals, and $84,000 cumulatively of incremental revenue from those new patients that they saw. So, I mean, we're talking very focused in a revenue model here, but I mean, just think of the opportunities for good patient care, for lifelong care because of the relationship that was created at the shelter, right?
Wow. I love those statistics. It's not always the right thing to do, but it was a good financial decision for the practices that really were volunteering because it was the right thing to do, right? And that's wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's really neat. And to think, to run that out, to think about what the value of over the lifetime of that animal is something we don't have all the data, because thankfully we're not through a lifetime of those animals, but it's pretty exciting to look at. It also, I mean, let's be honest, it takes the load off of veterinary practice, off of animal welfare organizations. There are many animal welfare organizations that don't have the resources to provide this care. And so people want to embark on a new relationship with their cat, and they go to the length of adopting the cat, and then the cat's sick. That's not a good way to build a relationship. What we've also seen is previously we had the free exam model, which many communities have, and it's great. It's a good step. And the bonding of that pet owner to that practice is very different when that veterinarian is taking care of an illness or an injury of that cat and illness. So it's something that is, as long as it's the veterinarian's opportunity to create this relationship. And if the veterinarian is eager to do that, it works very, very well. The times we haven't seen it work well is when veterinarians sometimes feel, oh, this is free, and resented, and that comes across to the client. The client doesn't want to build a relationship, and that's that's a choice on the veterinarian side. The other, honestly, another struggle we're seeing a little bit with it is that we have a really good economy, right now in Denver. So, and in many communities. So many practices aren't even accepting new patients.
Right.
So when it gets that good, having a model that stimulates growth and stimulates new patients can build a little frustration because they're trying to meet their agreement to the animal welfare organization to serve these people that have selected them as their veterinarian, and yet they're overwhelmed already. Who knew that veterinary medicine was going to have that problem, right? It's a good problem to have, but it doesn't.
Right. And fast forward to what's happening right now in the Metro Denver community. For year to date through August 31st, there have been 8,811 adoptions between Buddy Center and Dumb Friends League Main Shelter, Quebec Street. So 8,800 adoptions, cat and dog. 6,395 or 72%, 72.5% chose a veterinarian at the time of adoption. So, I mean, think about those sheer numbers, that 6,400 new pets, new cats and dogs are going into the communities already with a veterinarian selected. And then for the cats, the percentage is even higher, which is kind of, you think of Denver as a dog-friendly area, but of the 4,000, yeah, well, you certainly do. But of the 4,000 cats that have been adopted year to date, 3,042 have selected, adopters have selected a veterinarian. So that's close to 80%. 4 in 5 select a veterinarian at the time of adoption. So that is remarkable, and that just speaks to the collaboration of the Denver community, because there are all kinds of flavors of practices and all kinds of geographic areas, and as we get more data, as this expands, it'll be really fun to watch and to slice and dice and get more.
The data is like fascinating.
One of the challenges we saw from the animal welfare organization's point of view when we started this program was we adopt over 20,000 animals a year. So if we add even 5 minutes to the adoption council, we need 2 more full-time employees. So the time that even a small amount added to at the adoption consultation was a big concern. And that's why we felt like automating this system made a lot of sense, not only because we had a time constraint, but we also wanted to collect data. So that's where Catalyst came in, and I'll hit it back to Jane for that.
Yeah, I'm going to amplify that point for just a second. Jane mentioned the pilot that we ran, which actually ran for 2.5 years and was done by fingers on keyboards in Excel spreadsheets and faxes back from the veterinary clinics to provide that data. Hugely time intensive and not sustainable at scale. And that's where the third partner, Catalyst Council, came in and has been so valuable, is developing the technology platform. And I'm sure Jane will get into that, but a major contribution that allows this to be scalable. And in addition to all the great values around this model that Jane and April have mentioned, I just wanted to reinforce from the CVMA side, a key interest was in demonstrating a business model, understanding something that Bob Rohde reinforced in a meeting today, that shelters provide the biggest single identifiable and sustainable source of new pets into a community. So why wouldn't we want to create a business model that connects them to care and to a veterinarian?
Yeah.
And the Dumb Friends League has contributed such intellectual capacity to this, in addition to what the counselors have done in the adoption rooms. I really appreciate just the quantification you put around that. It's a significant effort. So for them to be committed to testing in a pilot and then to scaling and training and keeping their adoption counselors kind of on task with this and nurtured has been an immense investment, and I certainly appreciate that. So all of the partners have brought something to the table, but it is with Catalyst's investment in the technology platform that really allows us now to envision a demonstrated model with these kinds of activations and economics involved in them that are ripe now for taking into other countries. And with that, maybe that segues back to Jane.
No, that's a fantastic segue, actually, Ralph. It was really kind of you to say that, because what you guys have done in Denver is just phenomenal, right? And everybody's going to be like, could we possibly recreate it? So I do think with Jane, you talking a little bit about the software, then it leads really naturally into like, okay, now how this is how other communities can do this, because wow, I mean, it's just, it's phenomenal data. And even with people not in communities as passionate as Denver, because you guys do have a really terrific animal welfare community, but it is so transferable. So this is why I think Catherine and I were really excited to have you guys talk about this here tonight, because a lot of people will be able to listen to the archive video of this and think, okay, this is how we can do it too. And that's what we're all about.
I just want to chime in because so my first exposure to Dumb Friends League, as Ralph will remember, was way back when, right? When we were doing the microchipping. And I was always enamored by what Colorado had done, just in general, with the fact that the VMA and the shelter organizations work so closely together.
Yeah.
But I have yet to find another state that has been able, even with all the progress. I'm excited to see, like, and hear about how it's the databases and the technology behind it. Because how can we get more people to be like you all? And I did say you all.
Be careful what you ask for.
Exactly. So tell us how it works, Jane, and then tell us how it can.
Yeah, so there are a couple parts to that. The technology part, the taking the data from the shelter software, and then getting the information to the veterinary practice. So what happens is there's a selection of a veterinarian that's put into the system, and not only is the veterinarian message like, hey, you've got mail. No, you've got a new client. But they also get a message that says, click here and you can get the pets, the shelter pet health record. So if you think about the times that the adopter comes to the veterinary office and, yes, I just got this kitten and isn't she cute? Oh, they didn't give me any paperwork. Or I forgot the paperwork, and then we're sort of at a standstill at the practice. But this allows the information to come in advance. It allows the veterinary office to call the adopter rather than waiting for the adopter to thumb through a booklet to get to a list to find a phone number and call, so that there's that immediate connection. And then what the process is now is with the software plugin from the shelter softwares is to be able then to track the outcomes, which in the pilot was done manually by industrious practice managers and people cursing, I'm sure. But this will automatically pull the outcomes of those visits, not just the first visit, but measure the incremental care that was given after the complimentary, after the free care, and then with time, if they how much sustainability there is in that relationship. And to April's point, it's about what how's the veterinarian showing up at that exam. Whether it's an associate or the owner, that's a really key point, because if you look at this opportunity as a gift for something that's long-term and sustainable, then that's a whole different mindset. Instead of, oh, a free shelter exam and it's sneezing.
Absolutely.
So those are the things that become, you can tell who's successful, who's not. I mean, there's one or two practices. Now there's over 50 practices in Metro Denver that have opted in to participate. And there are a few practices that have had to say, no more this month, turn me off this month. We can't take any more because times are good. To Ralph and April's point, that they might not always be good. And what a way to build a relationship.
Oh gosh, what you guys are doing with that connection is phenomenal. So I know this is probably a question on some people's minds, and we'll get into how other states can do it or other metro areas can do it. But do the veterinarians raise their hand and volunteer? Do you reach out to them? How do you get your list of veterinary practices together?
CVMA is awesome at that. And they, because they had the legacy Healthy New Pet program, it was an outreach to the participants in that. And so there's that. And actually veterinarians can log in online. And if you wanted to go to calovma.org/connect, /connect-for-care, calovma.org/connect-for-care. You'll see how it works and some FAQs, and
Okay.
they're fantastic.
So if I were a practice, for example, I'm like, oh, this is interesting to me, I could go online, I could find more information, then I could sign my practice up. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Right now in Denver, and you know, it's kind of like cats, where every community is an individual. They all have their own different flavors, and whether Ralph's laughing, as CEO of the Veterinary Medical Association Executives, states different from local, and local A is different from local B, and with Denver, I mean, yes, that's Colorado VMA, but Denver is the biggest area, so that's where Healthy New Pet program started, and that's where this is starting, but certainly the opportunities to expand. So yeah, those are the things that are interesting. And how would another state or another community be able to take this on, want to take it on? Who's going to organize it? Is it the state association? Is it the local metro VMA? I'd like people's feedback on that.
Yeah, so that's a great segue. I think we're at 23 minutes after the hour, and we say that we quit at 25 minutes after the hour, but I have a feeling everyone here is going to want to stay on and stay engaged. So how about we just keep rolling into the after party, and if anybody has to sign out, you know, before we're finished with the conversation, feel free to do that. But I think we're all like on the edge of our seats trying to find out, like, how can we? Let's talk about what this might mean for our communities.
So I have a couple thoughts I'd like to share, and I've never done it in someone else's community, so these are all ideas. I think it's really important to figure out who you can collaborate with. Yeah. And many of us can talk about experiences, whether it's with other veterinarians or with shelters or rescues or animal welfare organizations, where we've had a bad experience and someone's been a jerk. And I can point out people on both sides that are difficult to collaborate with. Well, that doesn't mean you can't find someone that is good to collaborate with. And so I would start by finding who you can collaborate with, who you can have a conversation with. And it probably is at the scope of what our pilot was. It might be one animal welfare organization and a small group of veterinary hospitals that are willing to participate. From the veterinarian side, I can imagine if I were trying to build this on a community level, I would definitely want to engage my local or state BMA. But that doesn't, if there isn't buy-in there, if there isn't bandwidth there, there's always the ability to call your practices in your area and say, hey, watch this webinar. Hey, I love this idea, and I would like to do it. It's hard, I think, unless you're a brand new practice, and maybe if you're a brand new practice and it's a small organization, it would work one-on-one. But it seems to me that you need a group of practices that can meet that demand if it's a shelter or organization of any size. So those are a couple thoughts I have. Ralph, you went through this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I appreciate the comment that CVMA has been a vigorous partner in this. And I will, I guess, own up to conversations that we've had within the Catalyst community around, does it require a VMA? Could it activate in a community in other pathways? And April, you started going down that road of other ways that I think it could function and that the technology platform truly can support. what is awesome is when there is a VMA that endorses the concept and is willing to help, lead the lead horses to the water trough. I mean, that's wonderful advocacy. But the question is that also a limitation, whether it's for bandwidth or philosophical differences? I think the technology facilitates different pathways to implementation in different communities. And that pains me as someone who lives for and supports veterinary medical associations to think that everybody is not here and is just willing to go out and endorse this and start messaging tomorrow. But, there's reality too. So this is something that Catalyst is working at to envision how we might work differently with a slightly adjusted model in new communities. And I guess concurrent with that, I also hope that as data becomes available about, now that it's scaling, on kind of the implications over time, that we're going to get interest in the media around this idea and this business model and be able to demonstrate how effective it is. I had to chuckle when, times are good and the doors are turning fast enough for folks, but it doesn't take too much thinking to go back to other periods of time when circumstances are different, and you hope that your practice has best practices in place. And I would put this squarely in the category of best practices for economic sustainability of a practice. And what a great problem to have. Hopefully the doors do keep turning rapidly, but behavior change is hard, right? And this takes some behavior change to get this adopted within a practice. So
I'm
not without its challenges, but it's an awesome model.
Yeah,
So
it
as
is.
long as I'm hearing this, because part of me goes, well, let's take the bull by the horns. Let's just go ahead and get all corporate to get in there and get this done. But I think the success of what you guys created was because it was on the local level, because it had, it affected your individual community, and then was able to spread. So I'm torn in my brain about the best way to implement. And, my first brain went, well, of course, get the Ralph's organization and Catalyst, and let's have them drive it to every state. But then I think instead it'd be great to do a second pilot. Pick another major state, pick a California, pick a Florida, pick a New York, and say, okay, and then see if we could get some additional funding that could come from the industry to say, hey, listen, we'll help you, support you with some resources to see if this pilot could then sustain itself. So I think it'd be really cool to see another state dive in and try to see if they could do it, because I think that'll give you the more quantitative piece. And I also think, by the way, just for the record, I think Forbes should be writing an article about this or whatever, just from the perspective of how a community comes together and from an economic, and how it's a win-win for everybody. So just, that's the PR in me just came out, sorry. Can't
You
help
preach it, sister. You know a good writer.
April's dying to make a comment here. I've seen you lean forward like 9 times.
I am. Well, I was just thinking when Ralph was talking about the experience, I was thinking, it made me just reminisce about when I was the president of the Colorado Veterinary Medical Association and we were starting these conversations. This was not a fast process to bring into play. And one of the first things we did was do a survey of Colorado veterinarians, asking them, how many of your new patients are from shelters and rescues? And the answers varied greatly. And of course, veterinarians, as we want data when it comes to how we treat animals, but when it comes to how we run our businesses, we're just kind of like, oh, I think it's about gut feeling. It went from 2% to 95%. So there's some really did identify that their business was completely dependent on these adopted animals, and some didn't recognize that. But the interesting thing, and this goes to Catherine's comment about corporate, is, to be honest, part of the reason we did this was because there was a corporate veterinary practice that stepped up to the plate. Give them kudos. And in many communities, they are still offering this. that any new adoption comes to them and they do $250 worth of care for free. And the Colorado Veterinary Association's conversation was, what does this do to the private practitioner if all of the adopted animals go to this corporate practice?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the impetus behind starting this. And when we could have that conversation with our community, okay, you're one of these practices that says 90+% of your new patients comes from adopted animals, and this is on the table. And from an animal welfare perspective, we can't look our donors in the eye and say we just walked away and now we're still investing all this money in the animal, in that post-care. Whether that was the sole reason or not, it did motivate people to participate in the pilot and to try to make it work. Mm-hmm. And now I think it just works for itself. Everyone has buy-in. So
the grassroots part of it to me is just so, and Catherine knows I'm the softie, and I'm always going back to like the feel good story, right? But the grassroots of having independent practices and corporate practices come together because it's the right thing to do, not because somebody came in and funded it for them, but because it's the right thing to do and has a great economic benefit for them on the back end, is such it's truly a Hollywood feel-good story, right? Where bad situation, people step up to do the right thing, it starts to work, and voila, suddenly there are all these healthy cats and healthy veterinary practices. Yeah. You really couldn't write a better script.
So Catherine's doing the Forbes article and you're doing the video that
I'm doing the movie.
Touches the heart. Yeah.
Exactly.
There's got to be something to really bring this to the forefront. I mean, you guys have all the data for it, and it's just, and I'm, first of all, I'm shocked that your local TV station haven't already covered, but it's more than that. It's like trying to get this so that it really, is getting the coverage of all the pieces working together. It's a great PR story for the profession because the profession needs it, and so, yeah.
I'm excited for people to see the video we're doing here, the archive now, just to see, the thought and the passion and the results right behind this great idea. So I'm really curious to see what, Penny, Pat, Denise, Ilona, what do you guys have to say, weighing in on it from the perspective of where you guys live, what you see in practice, and if something like this is a model that you think could have some legs?
I think it's a great model. I think it's a phenomenal model that I think VMAs can do a huge job to make it work.
Be very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
First I want to say I love Denise's cat.
Mm-hmm.
And is it a him? No, it's a her.
The table accessory.
I love her. I find that this isn't something like a sole clinic can just jump in and think they're going to do it. It sounds like maybe a really forward-thinking person in the shelters in your area need to know about this. But it has got me thinking, because my sole purpose in 2020 is to drive more cats to our practice. That's my goal. And I'm thinking in my head, maybe I need to talk to some of the shelters. We already do the free exam coupons, but I like the idea of free exam plus, so that people, if their animal does have some kind of an issue, that maybe there's an extra little bit of money in there, and it's an investment in the future of having that client continue coming to your clinic. So I don't know, it's got me thinking things, but I just don't, because we don't have that program in our area. It just, I don't know where it fits in. It has me in a jumble, and I think I'm going to have to watch this again.
That's a good thing.
There might be an opportunity for you to go to a local practice that you believe in, or a local shelter that you believe in, and tell them about the model. Mm-hmm. And what occurred to me when you were speaking is there a cat shelter that specifically adopts only cats? That's probably a smaller scale than a full-blown shelter, where you could actually only need 1 or 2 practices to start a small program.
There is a Barn Cat Buddies, which is all cats, and primarily, not necessarily barn cats, but that's kind of in their title. And then we have another shelter who has chosen us to be their primary caregiver when they talk to people and they're starting to offer an insurance program. And we've become a part of that insurance program now. They reached out to us and we were like, wow, why did you choose us to be your primary care provider that you would talk to people about? Because we request records more than any other clinics in our area, and they like the medicine that we practice. So that would probably be my first place to go and see what we can do to move this to another level.
Great.
Pat,
Penny,
do you
what community are you in?
I'm in Roanoke, Virginia.
Okay.
Well, not being in private practice, it's hard for me really to make much of a comment, but it seems to me that the relationship building that would occur is certainly worth that money and the extra efforts to try to get things like this started, because it's all about the relationship on whether these cats are going to be seen or not, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We're facilitating first dates.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Match.com for cats and their, new veterinarians.
You can't have a
I am a little frustrated with in this area because I came here from Florida and I worked for a cat shelter there. Cats and dogs coming out of shelters never went to their new homes until they were spayed and neutered. Here, they leave the shelters with the promise that they're going to spay or neuter them.
Really interesting.
Which I have a problem with that. And so maybe in working hand in hand, we can come up with a way of tracking, making sure, offering it at a discount. I don't know. But I find that to be a problem with especially the overpopulation and the euthanasia numbers for dogs and cats.
It's interesting. An area like Roanoke, so being so relatively close to Virginia Tech, and it's okay, I have to admit, my knowledge of Roanoke is from driving to and from Clemson, from Philadelphia to Clemson, like for 4 years. So that's massive, driving past Roanoke and knowing, okay, I'm halfway there now. But it always seemed like, a fairly cosmopolitan, large-ish type of city. So it's kind of sad to hear then that the whole spay and neuter situation is a little backwards.
Yeah, and not only that, the TNR concept is totally foreign here. It's
cultural.
My understanding is until recently it was actually not legal to do trap, neuter, release.
Oh wow, interesting.
So Penny, one thing I've been wanting to say that I think your point brings up is call the leader of that shelter, call the CEO and just say, hey, I'd love to sit down and have a conversation about the spay neuter. The spay neuter thing about pre-adoption versus post-adoption is such low-hanging fruit because it's a flow in the shelter. They are investing the resources. They're just doing it afterwards, not before. And it just takes a very small shift in mindset and it can get done. I've seen many shelters switch from one version to the other and they don't see that they have an increased investment in resources. So call them, talk to them. And if you develop a program, that's another really important piece for anyone that develops a program is it's not going to be perfect. You're going to have something that irritates you. They're going to have something that irritates them. But if you guys have this willingness to have a conversation when that happens, then you can build the program.
Mm-hmm. So, that's a good idea.
Love that. Really good advice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we came up with some tips as we were preparing for this, and a lot of those kind of play into this conversation. One that we came up, and for you, Penny, approaching a shelter with your boss and then approaching the shelter, first, be non-judgmental or become non-judgmental, because if you don't agree with something that you've seen or what you think, be thoughtful about saying, well, some shelters do this instead of those shelters do this, and same from the sheltering community. Try not to lump everybody into one bucket. So Bob Rohde was the one that drilled that into my head, that sure, there are exceptions and there are individuals, and that's why April was so smart about suggesting, who can you work with? Pick your partner. And you're going to need to try something out and test it, and then you learn, and then you kind of start over and you test it out and you try and you learn, and then that cycle keeps growing and it continues. So that and making sure that the mindset is instilled, and April does such a good job on the Dumb Friends League side, and the cheerleader and her leadership, their cheerleaders, because it's just something that you just have to be positive about. Well, it'll work out, and it's there. People that want to participate, work together for the betterment of the community, we're there.
Yeah, and I do think having said what I said, is I do believe that one of the major shelters, they don't have a way to spay and neuter. They don't have a doctor. They don't have a facility that allows for that. And I think they're kind of forced into that, and their funding may not be there, to pay someone else to do it. It just surprised me because it wasn't the norm of what I was kind of used to. And I kind of expected in the Roanoke area, I would see more than I saw in little Ocala, Florida.
It's amazing how animal welfare
Very
varies
progressive.
across the country.
Yeah.
And veterinary medicine, to be honest.
It is really different. So Jane, are there other tips? I mean, you guys did have a couple of great tips. There are other tips that we're coming up on 3 minutes after the hour. And again, want to be very conscientious of everyone's time commitment with us here. But I know you had a couple of other good tips too that you had talked about. So I want to be sure you have a chance to share those out too, if you would like, before we.
Well, I think just being completely honest that you're not coming with a solution, just coming with questions, and just everybody agree to be transparent. And I think that's a big part of it. And there's some comment on the Catalyst Council website. There's a whole toolkit called Catalyst Connection, Forever Homes, Forever Health. So you can go to catalystcouncil.org/resources. And so there's, how you start, the sample memorandum of understanding, say this, we used to say this, now we say that. And one little thing, and April, maybe you can expand on the no-kill terminology, which is very confusing.
Yeah, we have 1 minute. But just real fast.
We can take longer than that.
Okay, so we really believe in what's called socially conscious sheltering, which is making the best decision for each individual animal. And unfortunately, managing to a number can cause some real big problems in our community. So, the concept of having 90% of more animals be adopted, and that meets the no-kill qualifications, really does create some problems. It creates shelters and rescues that only accept animals that are healthy and highly adoptable, and it stops having their ability to be open to mission and accept every animal that comes to them.
Oh, wow.
It stops shelters from collaborating when there's challenging cases, and especially hoarding cases from one another. It really creates a high risk of placing dangerous animals into our community to try to accomplish those statistics when it's not the right thing for the individual animal. So if you want more information, socially conscious, scsheltering.org is a really good place to hear about how we look at the future of sheltering and what we believe in.
That's fascinating. Well, we could spend a whole 45-minute Bridge Club talking about just that, I think, in terms of creating awareness of what the rules really are and what that really means, right? So that's fantastic. So I want to give an opportunity for, Denise, Penny, Pat, Ilana, anybody to have Ralph, last-minute questions or questions before we wrap up here for Jane and for April.
I'm just going to make one comment, and the comment is that, starting with ground zero is always hard. But what we've heard tonight is that there's a success story, there's resources available. And I think that bridge can be built a lot easier because you guys have spent the blood, sweat, and tears building this. So there is something. I always say it's always easier to react to something versus than starting from scratch with a blank page whenever I, am writing. And I feel like you guys have done all this heavy, hard lifting, and it's going to be easier for others now because they have somewhere to look and to see as a reference. And then to your point, Jane, it's not about the judging. Instead, how do you build off of further?
Absolutely.
Tearing it down. It will never work here. Instead, yes, but maybe we could, or yes, and that's what you're supposed to.
Yes, and exactly. Yes, and I'm going to go out in a little branch here and just say, honestly, the Bridge Club would love to have, Jane, April, and Ralph, you guys back again to host another Bridge Club where we really do map out how other combination shelter and VMA relationships can really approach this and make it work. So something for you all to go away and think about, because that would be, I think, a lot of fun to bring that conversation forward and, promote it to a lot of the appropriate people. We could really open up some eyes, and not only that, but get some action taken, which would make your 45 minutes worthwhile, I think, to see some other states be doing similar things. So if you're open to that, let us know.
And we want to hear about it if anyone does pilot it. We'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. All right. So with that, Jane, would you like to send us off into the evening with a final toast?
Well, I would. And before I do that, I'd like to call out Dr. Alona Rodan, who's in the middle of the bottom row of your screen, or at least of my screen, who's going to be showing us her favorite feline hacks. No hack intended. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central on the Bridge Club. And we hope as many people will join to share your favorite feline hacks as can. And I guess we're all here for cats. And while it's all about the cat, it's really all about the people. So with that, I would like to toast with a quote from Helen Keller, where she said, "Alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much."
Love that. Cheers.
Cheers.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thank you guys for a really phenomenal conversation. And thank you, Jane and April, for being here. Ralph, for your contributions. Penny, good to see you again. Denise, good to see you again. Alona, so glad you were able to make it. We'll look forward to having you tomorrow. And Pat, always good to see your face as well. Good night, everyone. And we'll see
Good night, everyone.
you tomorrow.